Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I am your host, Nelson, and today we are going to be doing 3 segments as usual. We're going to give a quick update on the Allstar game and the rosters, as an update came in yesterday on the new participants, given Joel Embiid and Julius Randle's injury. We're also going to look at what Kyrie had to say in the post-game interview and his press conference after absolutely destroying my Brooklyn Nets. And then we are also going to, in the third segment, we're going to take a look at the dunk contest and the possible participants, as well as if they should keep it in the All-Star weekend or if they should get rid of it entirely. There's also a fourth segment of the show, so stick around to figure out exactly what that is. But please, I ask that you remember to follow and subscribe the show. If you want to become a member or part of the show, there is a link in the description. And I'm out of breath because I had to run over here. I apologize, but I like to remind everyone to please remember to tip and to donate to get your comments recognized. The link is in the description. That is streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. It's also displayed right below underneath the ticker. Really helps make the show much more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. Once again, the link is streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. And without further ado, let us begin with the first segment of our show, which will be giving a quick update on the All-Star game and the new players that are going to be in the game, since Julius Randle and Joel Embiid have succumbed to injury. So All-Star game is just around the corner. Joel Embiid looks like he's going to be sidelined for the rest of the season. As you all know, he has for at least 4 weeks. As you all know, he is suffering a torn meniscus, and it'll take time to update on the status with Embiid because I didn't touch on it. I'll take time updating because I didn't really touch on him that much in the last podcast. So basically, his treatment is going to sideline him for at least 4 weeks. But knowing Joel Embiid and the history of his injuries, I actually don't think he is going to be sidelined for just 4 weeks, and it's going to be even longer of a time frame. I don't understand why Philly is trying to push this Joel Embiid. I don't understand why they're trying to push him to become healthy for the playoffs. It makes no sense to rush Embiid from an injury this severe to play in the postseason, especially in this postseason. If the Sixers had a chance, a legitimate shot of making it far and making noise with Embiid, then I would see a reason as to why they should push Joel Embiid forward and try to get him ready for the postseason. But personally, I think he should be deactivated for the entire season as of right now, because with how top-heavy the Eastern Conference has proven to be, and teams such as the Boston Celtics, Cleveland Cavaliers, and the Knicks on the come-up and on the rise, making it a lot more difficult to get past in the Western Conference, I don't think now is a good time for the Sixers to try and play Embiid. Embiid has been injured in every single postseason that he's ever had to play in that wasn't in the bubble, and that I don't even really count that because he only had to play 4 games in that span. So forcing him to come back from an injury so severe when there's no guarantee that the Sixers will even make it far in the playoffs is just a really bad move, in my opinion. And it could really hurt Joel Embiid for the next season coming up as well. But save him for next season, because as of right now, it doesn't look like Philly is going to even be in the playoff spot with how they've been playing. I've been incredibly wrong with my take on the possibility that if they could respond well with Joel Embiid out, given how good the bench and the rotations were and the rest of the players were playing. However, after a few games and after them losing to a bunch of teams that they should definitely be better than, I don't really think they can make it far without Joel Embiid. So they need to figure out a plan for next year and save Embiid for next year. I feel like that is the best bet. And as of right now, he's not even eligible to win the MVP. So what's the point in bringing him back now? But that's just me. As for the other injured player, Julius Randle, well, the Knicks will be just fine. They've shown that they're just fine. And Also, in the game that happened recently, Jalen Brunson went down with an ankle injury, so there might be another change in the All-Star lineup that is going to be coming up. But depending on how severe Jalen Brunson's injury actually is. But as for the Knicks as a whole, they have a fantastic team right now. They're playing with confidence, completely different direction than what Philly should be looking at, because the Knicks, they need to try and win now. Now is their time. And I don't think they should slow down, because they definitely have shown that they have the pieces and enough heart, see what I did there, to try and compete and to actually win. So with these two players gone, that means that 2 spots on the All-Star roster have opened up for other players to take. And those 2 spots go to Trae Young and Scotty Barnes. You guys know how I feel about Scotty Barnes. He's a great player, great for fantasy, great on my fantasy team, and I ended up being right again. With the picks that I thought should be All-Stars, and now they eventually end up being All-Stars. So yay. I was right again. The new I knew that Scotty Barnes deserved to be in the All-Star game, and so did Trae Young. It was only a matter of time before the NBA announced it officially, given the recent injuries. Like, you already know how I feel about Trae Young. He's a baller. He deserves to be in the All-Star game. He's been proving that he deserves to be in the All-Star game with his performance recently, constantly dropping 25-plus points and getting 10-plus assists as well. You guys know Trae Young. He is an incredible playmaker, incredible point guard, one of the best point guards in the East. Definitely deserved the starting spot, in my opinion, over Dame, with how he's been playing and how the production has been on the offensive side of the ball. And right now, he's finally getting the respect that he deserves and being in the All-Star game. He's not the starter, which is unfortunate, but still, being recognized and being in the All-Star game and in that rotation is an achievement in of itself. And the same with Scotty Barnes. Congrats to both of them for making the All-Star team and all of that. But even with the people with the media pushing the narrative that Trae Young should be in the All-Star game and Scotty Barnes should be in the All-Star game, there's obviously some people who are still not happy with the results that they got. Jarrett Allen plays the center position on the Cavs and is putting up 15 and 10 averages and is second place in the Eastern Conference right now with Cleveland. And many people say that Jarrett Allen was one of the biggest All-Star snubs. So I guess many people figured that since Joel was going to be out, the replacement for Joel was going to be a center, given how the only other center on the rotation for the East is Bam Adebayo. So the East really needs a center, and that replacement would, if Jarrett Allen was going to be replaced, that replacement would help that would match the positions of the players that are getting replaced. So Joel is being the center, so he would get replaced by a center, and Julius Randle being a forward, he would get replaced by a forward. Here is why I don't think that necessarily matters. We live in an era of positionless basketball now. So when you get right down to it, the NBA doesn't necessarily have core positions anymore like how other sports would have. Like, they have positions, but they're more so to group players in height rather than they are to assign players roles. So, like, I'll just give an example to other sports. So in football, when you have a wide receiver, the wide receiver is assigned to do a certain job. If you have a running back, that running back is assigned to do a certain job. If you have a quarterback, the quarterback is assigned to do a certain job. But now, with basketball, if you have a point guard, the point guard can decide, okay, I'm just going to spot up, I'm going to do this, I'm going to run a pick and roll. If you have a power forward, the power forward can decide, all right, I'm going to isolate here on the wing, and I'm going to make a play for him, for her, for him, for anyone. I said her, I can't believe I said her, that's my bad. And for the center position, the same thing applies with Nikola Jokic. Like, I can get in the post, I can make a play for him, I can make, he can run over to the back, I can make a play for him, or I could set a screen for the guard so that way he can create a good shot for either myself or my team. It's like, it's very, very positionless now, and there's not necessarily an assigned role that you get based on your position. It's not guaranteed. So I'll explain that a little bit more. The NBA and the teams, they've sort of divided the players into like 2 or 3 jobs. You have your ball handler, which is usually your point guard, your screener, which is usually the biggest guy on the court, your center, as well as your spot-ups. So the point guard doesn't necessarily have to bring the ball up all the time, because there is a chance that someone at either the 2, the 3, or the 4 could bring the ball up as well. A perfect example of this is LeBron James, easily one of the players that everyone can definitely understand and definitely like get a better idea. So LeBron, when he was on Cleveland, had Kyrie as point guard. So having Kyrie at point guard, you usually think that like, oh, Kyrie is going to bring the ball up. That's not necessarily the case. I mean, he would bring the ball up, but he didn't necessarily do it as much as LeBron James. Why? Because a lot of these players now, when the era that we're in, they are competent enough to make the plays themselves and to make plays for the other team, similar to how Kyrie can make plays for his team. Like, we all aren't going to deny LeBron's playmaking ability. But with this in mind, this makes the game a lot easier to manage for Kyrie and for other point guards, since they don't have to worry about having the ball all the time and bringing it up all the time. LeBron, when he was playing with Kyrie, was running point and always allowed Kyrie to give a breather. It allowed Kyrie to get a breather on offense, and the only job like that Kyrie needed to do while LeBron had the ball was to create space. And then let LeBron operate to see if LeBron can get a bucket. The screener is easy. That's the big center or player, depending on the lineup. If the lineup is small, then it might not even be the big center that is setting the screen. But the screener role is definitely easier because you're just setting the screen and you're helping the guard create the space, and you're rolling or you're popping out to get an open shot for your point guard, or small forward, or whoever it is. But just to recap, the 2 main positions, point guard and center, while the other players are out there creating space. This is why you see like so many teams run isolation and pick and roll, and why everybody else on the team is just standing. Because they're not just standing there doing nothing, they're creating space. This makes the game easier to manage. The ball remains in the hands of your best decision makers, who can man double coverage and make easier looks for the others. So, with all that in mind, with how positionless the league has become, I think it's come a time where we have to put positions aside and just look at a player based on talent and production rather than positions when deciding who should be in the All-Star reserve team, like just in case some of these players get injured. There's way too much talent in this league right now, and every position, there's way too much talent in this league to just pick by position alone. So it should be decided by raw talent, and not to mention it should also be decided like, I don't know, position should not be taken into account in this whatsoever. And that's sort of the only argument that Jarrett Allen essentially has for being in the All-Star game, because the only other argument I could see would be him being in the 2nd seed of the East right now. And while I do think winning deserves some recognition, he isn't necessarily the main player providing on the offensive end. That's Donovan Mitchell. Donovan Mitchell is the main reason why the Cavs are where they are right now. His offensive production and his leadership is driving them to win games. Not to mention, like, the rest of the team is definitely helping as well. But Jarrett Allen has a major role being a rim protector and being, like, you know, the pick and roller. But it's not like he's doing it at an insane production, like at an insane level of production, as Trae Young is running the offense on his team. Like, Donovan is the one that definitely deserves that all-star spot, which he has already. But there are too many people who are talented to be in the all-star game. And it shouldn't be decided based on just record alone, because that's unfair to people who don't have a good team. And then when we get put in situations like where we think players are just going to get snubbed, because of their team record. It's just not fair. So the All-Star game right now, it's going exactly as planned. There is one segment about the All-Star break that I haven't covered yet, which will be the dunk contest. I will cover that a little bit later. But we're going to see how the lineup... I have a feeling the lineup is going to change once again, given the fact that Jalen Brunson just went down with an ankle injury. Hopefully, I am praying that it is not a severe injury, and maybe it'll just hopefully just sideline him for the All-Star game. Just for the All-Star game. I just hope that he's not hurt, because if he's hurt, New York is going to have a serious problem. But with that in mind, if he's not available for the All-Star game, that opens up a spot for Jared Allen. So maybe everybody is going to get what they want in the end. But with that in mind, we are out of time with this segment. So I'm going to go, after the short break, I'm going to talk about the next segment where we talk about Kyrie's return to Brooklyn and some interesting things he said about in his post-game interview. So I will be right back after this short break.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit. A stupid myth, you choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh,
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
And we are back with the second segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. And we are going to talk about Kyrie's return to Brooklyn and some of the words that he has to say towards the post-game interview, and what I'm going to just look at what he had to say and what I think about it. But before I get into that, I'd also like to remind everyone, as always, to please remember to tip and to donate to get your comments recognized. Make sure you go to the following link, that is streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. Helps the show, makes the show much more interactive between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. So once again, that is streamelements.com/gsmcsportsnetwork./tip. The link will be displayed in the description below, as well as in the ticker that is displayed on the bottom of every single show segment. And without further ado, let's get into the second segment where we talk about Kyrie Irving. As you all might know, I'm a Brooklyn Nets fan, so this is not going to be a segment that I might enjoy whatsoever. This is not going to be something that I'm going to want to talk about. But his post-game speech definitely caught my eye, so I'm going to do it anyway. So I'm just going to start out right now. Kyrie Irving made his return to the Brooklyn Nets, and he absolutely destroyed us, with Luka Doncic dropping 36 points. Kyrie Irving ended the game with 36 points, and Luka ended with 35 and 18. They absolutely killed us on their offensive side of the ball, and we couldn't do anything on either side to stop it. Cam Thomas did the same thing that he did the previous night, go 6 for 16 and only get 16 points. So, as I mentioned earlier with Cam Thomas, his offensive production is very, very, very important to the team and its success. And if he's not producing on offense, then he can't produce on defense, and that is just going to hurt his team in the end. And it ended up hurting my team. It was all Kyrie and Luka tonight. Nobody else showed up to play, and it was very sad to watch. As a Nets fan, seeing Kyrie play all the games that he can with the Mavs is very, very painful for me to watch. Because he could have been winning so many games with us, but no, he has to just ruin it all and request a trade and to get out of Brooklyn. And oh my goodness, it was the worst time of my life. You know what? Let me take you back to about 2019, before the pandemic came in and ruined my life. Kyrie and Kevin Durant signed with the Brooklyn Nets for years and years of nothing but terrible basketball to watch around the New York area. Since I lived in Jersey, most of the games were they were bad. Like, the Nets were bad, the Knicks were bad. They were always bad. Like, New York sports. We just have a history of just being bad. And for some time, they had Carmelo Anthony on the Knicks, so I would tune in to watch that, but it wasn't all that good. The Knicks were just mediocre, and Carmelo Anthony was he was being hated on by a lot of the Knicks players. They were tired of him. But once he left, I got some enjoyment watching Melo. He might not have done much on the offensive side of the ball in terms of being flashy, but he was very interesting to watch. But after he left, there was nothing really to watch for basketball on the New York side of things. So once KD and Kyrie signed, that was probably the most exciting days of my life, because I was finally going to be able to see KD and Kyrie every single day whenever I wanted to tune in and watch a basketball game. And KD being hurt the first year didn't help, but Kyrie started out strong, scoring 50 points in his first game as a Brooklyn Net, and he almost made the sickest game winner in NBA history towards the end, but that ended up not happening, unfortunate. But it really seemed like this team was destined to do great things with these two. Then COVID-19 came, and since the Nets had no chance in winning, Kyrie was deactivated for that season. Then the next season came in, and that's when my expectations went through the roof with this team. It was a big three with them trading for James Harden, and it was arguably one of the best offensive big threes ever assembled. Because everybody on that team, every one of those three players on that team could create a shot for themselves, and they could create a shot for other people. I personally thought at that time, if there was going to be an ISO lineup that would win a chip, it was going to be that lineup. I had a lot of faith in Kevin Durant. I had a lot of faith in Harden and in Kyrie, but they didn't really play together that much, and they only played 13 games. I didn't really think much of it at first. But once it kept happening, I realized this was going to be a big problem with Kyrie just deciding to not play in some of these games. He, for some reason, the following year, when we failed in the postseason, and then came COVID-19 in the following year, where the COVID-19 laws, in New York, which restricted Kyrie from playing in all of these games. Now, usually that wouldn't bother me, because Kyrie would just essentially need to play these games and just take the vaccine and it would be fine. But we all know what happens. Kyrie doesn't take the vaccine, and it doesn't look like he wants to play. If you really, really wanted to play, you would just take the vaccine so you could play. Him not taking it made it seem like he just didn't want to play whatsoever, and I just couldn't stand it, and Harden couldn't stand it whatsoever, and that's why Harden requested a trade. Similar to how I don't like Ben Simmons for not playing, Kyrie just infuriates me even more because he's such a great player. And when he played with LeBron, he didn't have this problem. So what happened? Why all of a sudden now, when Kyrie doesn't have LeBron, he just doesn't want to play games? Once he just chose not to take the vaccine, I immediately lost hope for this team. And once he started playing again and they went on a win streak, I was very optimistic. With they could probably do this. And then Kyrie just slams us with a trade out of nowhere. I don't know how his character just changed completely in that span. But regardless, with all of the problems that happened, and all the drama, all the media attention that happened in Brooklyn, Kyrie had this to say at the end of his postgame. He said, "If I didn't get injured versus the Bucks, do I still ask for a trade? If KD's foot wasn't on the line, are we talking about a different legacy here? If James doesn't ask for a trade, all the woulda, coulda, shoulda, hopefully after this night we can put it to rest," end quote. And that's why the title is Woulda, Coulda, Shoulda, because that's what he said. And that's the story of the lineup. They would've, they could've, they should've. They should have done all of these things. And my interpretation of this quote is just him trying to blow this off. Like, he's just trying to forget about his failure in Brooklyn, similar to how he's trying to forget his failure in Boston. And I could answer all of these questions. So the first question, if I didn't get injured versus the Bucks, do I still ask for a trade? I don't know if he asked for a trade because we were on a 12-game winning streak. And he just decides to ask for a trade out of nowhere. Oh my gosh. And as a Brooklyn Nets fan, that just infuriates me. We were winning. We were doing a great job. But he just requested a trade out of nowhere. And it's like, why? Even Kevin Durant was shocked about this. So that answers the first question about Kyrie. And if KD's foot wasn't on the line, are we talking about a different legacy? I'm not entirely sure if we are, because after Kevin Durant left Golden State, what has he done in the postseason? Legitimately, what has Kevin Durant done in the postseason without Golden State? He lost in the second round against the Bucks. Granted, his foot was on the line. Then he gets swept by the Boston Celtics, putting up one of the worst performances in Game 2 that I've ever seen. And then he goes to Phoenix, where he once again puts up a terrible performance in a closeout game at home in Game 6 against the Denver Nuggets. So with all of that in mind, what has he done? What has he done in the postseason without that ridiculous Golden State team? He's done nothing. So honestly, the legacy for KD would be exactly the same, because he hasn't done anything to prove that he can be that guy in the postseason. And he might have proved it in Golden State, but I'm sorry, you cannot be the guy when you're surrounded by those guys, and just those guys. You simply cannot. And as for the next question, if James doesn't ask for a trade, if you were playing and if you took the vaccine, he wouldn't have requested a trade. I am 100% certain about this. He would not have requested a trade if Kyrie were to actually play the game and if he were to look like he wanted to play the game. I cannot stand Kyrie and his off-the-court antics, as you can tell. I love it when he plays. He's a great player, but when he talks and he talks, I just think he's using his First Amendment rights incredibly poorly. And as for, that was the only thing that he said in his quote, what followed after, woulda, coulda, shoulda, that's just him deflecting and trying to not make this a big deal, like how, it was just like, it was stuff outside of my control. And that's what he does. He blames things outside of his control when he definitely had control of the situation to a certain point. It's just, he didn't bother. It's that simple. Kyrie just didn't bother. And it infuriates me how he tries to deflect all of this on his other players, on his teammates, and like on other situations that happen. And it's like, you could have done things to remedy that situation if you would have just played. But no, you had to sit out, and you want to blame the mayor for you not taking the vaccine. And it's for no reason, because he has said several times that he knew that COVID-19 was real. He just wasn't taking the vaccine just because. It makes no sense to me. Zero sense whatsoever. And him saying this quote, deflecting and doing all that kind of stuff with, it just shows that Kyrie he's a yapper. That's all he is. And I don't think this Kyrie and Luka relationship, I don't think it's going to work in the long run. Like, they might be working now, But eventually, Kyrie is going to be unhappy. It's just going to happen. It's been happening with Boston. It happened to Brooklyn. It happened with Cleveland. He always brings a problem. And even with Boston, he said he planned on re-signing with Boston. That didn't happen. So all the things that he might seem happy on Dallas, but that might just be a lie. We have no idea with Kyrie, because given all of the things that he's done in the offseason and all of the drama that he brings to a team. I will say, however, that so far with the Mavs, he hasn't necessarily been that bad. He was injured, which is why he was missing several games. But in the long run, I don't see this Mavs team being a team that can compete and a team that can make it far into the postseason and riding Luka's back. Especially with the Los Angeles Clippers being the 1 seed. In fact, you know what? I might as well talk about how the Clippers, they tend to own the Dallas Mavericks. Having Kyrie on the roster, I don't think that's going to change the situation whatsoever. If they run into the Clippers, they are most likely going to lose. And the media around it is saying that, like, oh, Luka owns the Clippers. That's not true. Luka hasn't won a single series against the Clippers. He might play well against the Clippers, but again, as I mentioned before, ISO-heavy lineups, they aren't going to win you championships, especially when it's those two ISOing. Kyrie is another example of a player that hasn't done anything in the postseason without LeBron James. What has he done in the postseason without LeBron? He underperformed with Boston several times. He got injured in one of the postseasons with Boston, and then he underperformed, saying, I will never shoot 8 for 22 again. What does he shoot? Shoots 7 for 22, and then he deflects. And then after that postseason, he leaves, and the Boston Celtics end up doing better without him. That should speak volumes. The Boston Celtics right now, with Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, they're doing miles better without Kyrie on the team. Obviously, I can't say the same for my Brooklyn Nets, but when you lose good players like James Harden, Kevin Durant, it's definitely not going to be something that the team can adjust so easily. But with that, those are my opinions on Kyrie and his quote and what he said in the post game. He's just deflecting. He's just yapping. He's doing what he does best. And with that, we are out of time with the second segment. Tune in for the third segment, where I give an update on the dunk contest and its participants, and to see exactly where the dunk contest should go and what direction they should take, whether they should have it in the Allstar game or whether they should not have it in the All-Star weekend. So tune in right after this short break. I will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this segment, we are going to be covering the dunk contest. Now, the dunk contest is one of the more overlooked parts of All-Star Weekend, and it's something that I just started covering right now. As you know, I haven't covered it in any of the previous segments because we don't really know much about the dunk contest or its participants at that point. But I will say that it is a very overlooked part of the All-Star weekend, and dunking is sort of a lost art in this league. Like flashy dunking, I guess you could say. I don't really see that many people try and do flashy dunks on a breakaway anymore. Like unless it's somebody like Obi Toppin or Paul George at times. Now, people are looking at it like, at least now with the NBA and how efficiency ranks above everything, teams are now looking at dunks like, oh, it's just a guaranteed 2 points, same as a layup. And with the three-point line showing a lot more prominence, the dunking has been few and far between. with a lot of these players. Like, we don't really see that many people who are super freaky athletic, or like as many as they were back in the time, like MJ, Kobe, and Clyde, just to name a few. Obviously, there are high flyers in this league, and there are players who can get up there and have enough bunnies in order to get up there and do these cool dunks, but they aren't necessarily flashy with it, or at least that I've seen. I will say that I will bring the attention to players such as Ant and Donovan Mitchell. Those guys are definitely really flashy with their dunks. There have been clips and highlights of them throwing the ball off the backboard and putting the ball in the hoop, which was one of the coolest things that I've seen. And and it's starting to be a lot more mainstream for players and for viewers to see these types of dunks in game. So while the players that I mentioned are able to shoot, they're some of the best high flyers that the league has seen: Kobe, MJ, and Clyde. Now, there aren't that many in the NBA that like kind of have a similar bounce like they do anymore. Like, we all know the stipulation with Kobe and MJ and Clyde. Like, when they take off, they take off. Like, they soar to the sky. And you don't necessarily like have that many players that have that type of bounce anymore, which is very ironic given how the game has advanced. With how the game has advanced recently in terms of in the previous years, you'd think that dunking the ball would be much more prominent and would be like we'd see much more athletic dunks, much more freaky athletic dunks done by these players. But it's sort of taken a back seat and it's sort of downgraded in a sense. So the dunk contest now, the most likely participants are going to be Jaylen Brown, Mac McClung, Jamie Jacquez Jr., and Jacob Toppin. Now, you might not recognize some of the players. That's because they're from the G League. Mac McClung was from the G League. He took a roster spot on the Orlando Magic. And Jacob Toppin is also on the G League. So, yes, that's Obi Toppin's brother, should mention. But no Obi Toppin and no Donovan Mitchell in the dunk contest is like, I'm like, how? Like, why aren't they in the dunk contest? Obviously, Donovan Mitchell is, I guess now that he's participating in the three-point contest, he wouldn't want to participate in the dunk contest. But I would really like to see them in the dunk contest because those guys are some of the high flyers. Some other players that I would also like to see in the dunk contest are Anthony Edwards, John Morant, Russell Westbrook, and Aaron Gordon. Now, I feel like those players, if they were in the dunk contest, it would definitely attract views because those players are stars, and that's what you need in the dunk contest. You need stars, players who can draw in a lot of viewership. And I know Aaron Gordon isn't going to participate in the dunk contest because he retired from it. And I haven't really paid much attention since he retired from the dunk contest. I'm not even going to lie to you. Because he was robbed multiple times from being the dunk contest champion, in my personal opinion. There was, most of the time when I see it, a lot of these voters just give out 10s for free. And Aaron Gordon received nothing but 10s in his last dunk contest up until the very end, and that's what caused him to retire. So with that in mind and with how easy it is to get 10s, it gets really, really boring. Not to mention how again, as I mentioned, the game has advanced from 1990 to now and 1980 to now. So with that in mind, how many more creative dunks can you do? Like, it's come to a point where we've sort of seen all that the human body can do with with dunking. Like, it's come to that point. We've all seen East Bay dunks. We've all seen reverses. We've all seen 360s. We've all seen windmills. So getting more creative with dunks is a serious, serious problem. And it's a big challenge that is part of the dunk contest, being creative. And we've had so many of these athletes try to be creative, and it just ends up not working, and it ends up being really, really bad. So because of this, and because of the lack of creativity, and the fact that that we've seen a lot of dunks, and we've seen practically all the dunks that could possibly happen, and the fact that the dunk contest has been boring, there's been talks on whether or not the dunk contest should be removed entirely. So I personally wouldn't mind seeing it gone. I feel like I've seen all the dunks that you could possibly do, and I'm not sure how much more creative athletes can get by dunking the ball, especially when performances like Aaron Gordon are taken for granted. Like, the league has gotten so bad and so boring with this dunk contest that it has to bring up G League players in order to participate in this dunk contest. G League players who are essentially not good enough to make an NBA roster and not athletic enough, quote, quote. I say athletic because right now in this NBA, you don't necessarily have to be athletic to be successful. Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic, perfect examples of people who aren't that athletic. Obviously, they are very athletic because you have to be in order to be in this league. But compared to other players like Anthony Edwards and Donovan Mitchell and Russell Westbrook and Paul George, like, you can see the lack of athleticism and like how sluggish they move in terms of their play style. Not saying that they're bad, great players. Not saying that it's bad at all, but you can see the difference. So, with that in mind, bringing G League players to go into the dunk contest, and not only that, win it, because Mac McClung won the dunk contest last time, or to put on a good show, like, it's a serious problem in terms of the NBA perspective. Like, if I'm an NBA athlete and I'm getting showed out by a G League player, I'd be incredibly disrespected. That's my personal opinion. But in a way, I could see like how this definitely, like, I like the idea and how it could help because it brings awareness to a lot of these G League players. And with that notoriety, a lot of scouts are going to be looking at them and seeing if they can be of use to an NBA roster. So in a sense of like bringing more attention to like the little guys, I guess you could say, I agree with that. I see that as a positive. But on the other hand, like I mentioned before, if I'm an NBA athlete and I'm getting showed up by a G Leaguer in the dunk contest, I would be very offended. And if the G Leaguer can win the contest and put up a good show, then a lot of the scouts, like, they're going to look deeper into their game, see if they can go to an NBA team. And obviously, given like how the NBA is so heavy on three-pointers, I'm not entirely sure how much attention they will pay to how much the scouts will pay attention to these dunks. But it brings attention to them as well as incentives for winning. But as I mentioned before, on the other hand, if I'm getting showed up by a G Leaguer, I'd be very offended. Like, Michael Jordan would take that personally. Like, there's no way that this kid in the league that's worse than mine is outperforming me in the dunk contest. No way. But, like, the NBA is full of athletes. And the NBA can't even pick 4 people to participate in the dunk contest for their league. It's NBA dunk contest, not G League dunk contest. So that's why I mentioned before how I would like Anthony Edwards, Ja Morant, Russell Westbrook to be in these type of dunk contests, because they are players that are going to draw attention. A lot of people are going to want to see just how athletic these players can be. And the fact that they have to go down a league and invite players that nobody has heard of, no offense to any of those players, but let's be real here. How many casuals turn on a TV and watch a G League game? Not many. So, given the fact that they were bringing people that aren't necessarily that famous, it doesn't help the dunk contest in terms of viewership, and it doesn't help the dunk contest gain credibility. Like, and it's amazing. Like, are these NBA players not ashamed of the fact that like the G League players could out dunk them? Like, I would be very ashamed, but that's my personal opinion. And that is something that, like, this league has lost. Like, a lot of these players, they're only competitive towards championships because in the end, that is the only thing that matters. The league lacks competitiveness in everything else. It lacks drive. It lacks people who try to win. It lacks big rivalries because everybody is like everybody else's friend. And it's like, it's boring. It loses that competitive aspect. Like, I want to see teams go against each other and they don't like each other. I want to see them butt heads. I want to see them cause problems. All that kinds of stuff. Like, it's part of the game. And that's something, that competitive drive is sort of been lost. And this is a problem not only for the dunk contest, but for the rest of the league and for All-Star Weekend in general. I haven't even talked about in detail who I want to win this dunk contest, because I have no idea who will win. The last time I legitimately watched the dunk contest, I wanted Aaron Gordon to win, because I like watching Aaron Gordon and I like watching him dunk. We need more players that are known for dunking in the NBA, and it will drag much more attention to this dunk contest. But that hasn't happened recently. Like, the reason why I stopped watching the dunk contest, like I mentioned earlier, was because Aaron Gordon was getting nothing but 50s up until the end, where Dwayne Wade decided to just let that Derrick Jones win the award, and I was absolutely infuriated that he lost, because he had nothing but 50s the entire time. And it's difficult to watch. Aaron literally jumped over Taco Fall, and he didn't win the dunk contest. That was the last straw for me in terms of the dunk contest. But with that, we are out of time for this third segment talking about the dunk contest. So now I'm going to get into the fourth segment, where I talk about the NBA, I give you an update on last night, and the upsets that happened last night. So this is a new segment that I'm trying out. It's called Upset Alert, and that's going to be segment 4 of the GSMC Basketball Podcast. So tune in for that after this short break. And we are back with the fourth segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. And we're just going to give a little update on some of the games that happened from last night, talk about the upsets, and see what the teams should be looking forward to going into the postseason, going into the regular season after All-Star break, as well as what direction they should take this team or their team given these upsets. So first, let's start with the big upset that happened last night, which was the Bucks losing again to this time to the Phoenix Suns. So this time they lost to a relatively competent team, but again, I just find it ridiculously hilarious how Doc Rivers has lost yet again. It's unbelievable how they just can't win a game with him at all, and it's unbelievable how he was actually selected to be the All-Stars head coach with just one win under his belt. There was a stat that came up after the game that said the last time that the Bucks lost on a Tuesday was when COVID kept the fans out of the arena. So that is such a long time ago, and it's unbelievable to me how quickly this team just got worse once Doc Rivers got here. It's like only under Doc Rivers would they end this streak. Only under him. And Giannis had a great game. Dame didn't play this season. Chris Middleton went out late in the game, so they didn't have two of their best players. So that definitely plays into them losing to Phoenix. But this is where the Bucks need to hit the panic button. they need to figure it out right now. Doc Rivers has to figure it out with this team. Same with Giannis. Same with the Dame. Dame didn't play this game, but so far recently he hasn't been playing well whatsoever for the Bucks, and they need to figure it out really quickly. They need to figure it out like now, because come playoff time, like Doc Rivers is already blowing leads to a bunch of teams that they shouldn't be losing to. So going into the playoffs, I think it's going to get worse at this rate. Like, if you paid attention to the podcast to my last podcast, I talked about Doc Rivers for a very long time and his coaching experience. We all know it's been full of disappointment. And I don't want to jump the gun as of right now, because it's still like the regular season and like All-Star break hasn't even like popped up yet, so they still have time. So maybe I'm being a little bit too harsh, but given that it's Doc Rivers, the adjustments need to happen now, because they won't happen in the playoffs. I can guarantee you the adjustments won't happen in the playoffs. They have to figure out their offensive game plan now. They need to be consistent now, because if they just don't hit the shots, Doc Rivers isn't going to do anything to help them, because he doesn't. That's just what he does. You can check out my last episode and my last podcast where I further go into Doc Rivers and his problems with being the head coach for several different teams that are competent enough to win it. You can go ahead and watch that. But the Phoenix Suns, I'm going to talk about Phoenix. They had way too many scores for the Bucks to keep up with them. Middleton didn't show up in this game, as I mentioned before, and he didn't give Giannis the help that he needed. The big three in Phoenix didn't score less than 25 points. Booker led the way with 32 points. Kevin Durant ended the game with 28, and Bradley Beal ended the game with 25. Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal also were able to snag 10 rebounds. So, obviously, this team has a lot of scores. Because they're scoring, they don't necessarily need to have defense in the regular season, but coming playoffs, when the playoffs roll around, their defense definitely needs to be a strong point and something that they should work on. So because their offense isn't necessarily, while it's consistent and while their players are definitely consistent, it's not always guaranteed that you will have the best night. So you need to have something to fall back on, and that is the defense. So that's what I have to say about Phoenix and their lineups. Obviously, what they're doing in the regular season is all right. They could be a lot better. But again, have to see this in the playoffs. Same thing applies for the Clippers. Have to see all of it in the playoffs. But as of right now, they're on a pretty good road. I see them finishing in like the 6th seed, maybe the 7th seed, depending on the teams that they play and like who they lose to. But so far, it's not that bad for the Suns. But the Bucks, on the other hand, even though they're like 3rd and 4th, like they're bouncing between 3rd and 4th because of how top heavy this Eastern Conference is. They definitely need to step up. And the adjustments need to happen now, because if they can't get into an offensive rhythm now, going into the playoffs, it's just not going to be a good look for them. And this isn't the only team that got upset tonight. Both of the teams in the West that previously held a top 2 spot both lost to bottom feeders on respectfully bottom feeders. Like, they aren't necessarily at the teams that they lost to, like, they're playing teams, but they aren't great teams. No disrespect to them whatsoever. Let me go ahead and elaborate on some of these games. So, the Oklahoma City Thunder recently lost to the Utah Jazz, and it's a good thing that I mentioned Lauri Markkanen in the previous podcast when I did. And he's been criminally underrated, as I mentioned before. He ended the game with 33 and 11. I told you he was underrated. So this game was very close up until the end, but Oklahoma City just couldn't hold on for the win as Utah upset them and surprised them with this great performance coming in from everybody from all around. Shai didn't score 31 this game. He had 28 this time. Jalen Williams had 26, and Chet had 22. The starters definitely outplayed the Utah Jazz starters as a whole, but it was the bench that was the deciding factor for the Utah Jazz. I'm just pulling up the box scores right now. If the box scores would load, this Wi-Fi is absolutely terrible. All right, here we go. They finally load. The bench had three other players in double figures. Keontae George ended with 16. Jordan Clarkson ended with 12. And Kelly Olynyk ended with 10. Kelly Olynyk was very vital to them in the fourth quarter of this game. And obviously, John Collins ended the game with 22 points. I forgot to mention that. But obviously, the performance of Lauri Markkanen scoring 33 points was the driving force in how Utah ultimately outplayed the Oklahoma City Thunder. But definitely their bench had something to do with it. The bench for Oklahoma City, while there are a lot of people that come off the bench, they don't necessarily produce all that much. They had 2 players come off the bench that ended up getting 0 points, and they played well over 10 minutes. So, not much production coming from them. And this losing to the Jazz, if you are the Thunder, it's not ideal. They have wins, the Thunder have wins against great teams, like the Nuggets, the Wolves. They've beaten all of these teams, but they also have really questionable losses to the Jazz and to even the Pistons. They lost to the Pistons and other teams that just aren't competing in this team. Losing to the Pistons now is a serious problem. You can't lose to the Pistons. They are bad. They're terrible for a reason. You can't lose to the Pistons. No disrespect to the Pistons players. They are great, but it's just they have not been able to figure it out whatsoever. And they're fighting for that number 1 pick. We'll see if they can get it. I'm not sure they're going to get it given how it's Detroit and how bad luck works. But let's continue with OKC. This is a really big problem. A serious problem. Losing to bad teams, but beating good teams. It's inconsistent. And teams that lack consistency are teams that I'm afraid of going into the postseason. And that's that I was wrong about this OKC team. I didn't think that they were going to I thought they were going to make a lot of noise in the postseason, but given these losses to some of these bottom-feeding teams, I don't think they're going to make that much noise at all. I could see them losing in the first round, depending on who they match up against. If they match up against Phoenix in the first round, I could see them losing that series. Or even a team like the Pelicans, I could see them losing to them. But I digress. The other team that ended up losing today was last night, was Minnesota. They lost to the Chicago Bulls. Now, this game was a bit closer, and everybody on the Wolves was producing offensively. It's just the defense wasn't there for them tonight. Kobe White, I haven't talked about him much on this podcast, another very underrated player. And he's now getting known for his performance, and he's getting much more notoriety from the media now. He ended the game with 33 points. DeMar also ended with 33 points. And Vucevic ended with 24. Drummond ended with 16 and 16. Drummond is so odd to me because he always can put up these big numbers while at the same time not having that much of an impact on the game. However, these numbers are great. The numbers are great. It's just the impact, not all there. It's a common problem. And a common problem with both of these teams is, shockingly, the defense. All of these teams, the defense of each of these teams is a bit shaky. I mentioned the Bucks earlier in losing to Phoenix Suns. The Bucks have a very hard time guarding the pick and roll, and I also noticed they have a very difficult time switching. They have a very difficult time deciding who should be guarding who and who's should be running out to the open man. And that's something that is very integral to a team when you're going up against a team that has a lot of three-point shooters. You have to be mindful, and you have to be ready to switch, and you have to be ready to go play pickup. And with a team like Phoenix and how dangerous they are, if you leave any of them open, they are going to punish you. Grayson Allen will punish you. Kevin Durant will punish you. Devin Booker, Bradley Beal, Nurkic, Eric Gordon, all of those players will punish you from three. So you absolutely cannot let up on the three, and you have to be ready to switch. You have to be active. And the teams have great rim protection. all the teams that I just mentioned earlier. The Timberwolves, they have Rudy Gobert. The Oklahoma City Thunder, they have Chet Holmgren. And with the Bucks, they have Giannis and Brook Lopez. So with this in mind, a lot of teams are going to try to deviate from the paint and try to score via the three-point shot. Because of the length of Rudy Gobert and the length of Chet Holmgren, it's going to affect a lot of players going up with shots in the paint. So to remedy that, they have to try and take a bunch of threes. So with that in mind, the players need to be much more active on the defensive side of the ball. They can't be lazy. You cannot afford to be lazy when you are going up against teams like this with how heavy they are and how much they're going to focus on the three-pointer. Cannot let up on the three. And that's sort of been like a big problem with a lot of these teams. And like a lot of the reason why they end up losing is because the teams like that they go up against just end up scoring like ridiculous amounts. They end up scoring way more than they need to. Like the Utah Jazz, they shot 14 of 35 from three. The fact that they were getting 35 shots from out there, like 35 open shots and 35 good looks, shouldn't happen. And the Bucks' late game against Phoenix, I noticed that they were leaving several people open from three. And the Bucks, the Phoenix Suns didn't even shoot that well from three. They only went 8 for 28, and they still ended up winning. So the fact that they were shooting 8 of 28 from the field shows that like their defense needs to like improve around like within the paint, or like not within the paint, but within the 3-point line because of the mid-range shooters that Phoenix Suns have. So might be a different story when going up against Phoenix because of like the difficult shot makers that they have on the team. But the most of the time they're going to be looking for shots in the paint and they're going to be looking for 3-pointers. And with the Chicago Bulls, again, another team that shot relatively efficient from three, 12 of 30. The 3-pointer, like, it needs to be guarded when you have rim protection. The rotation, it has to be there. And it's very, very difficult with somebody like, with players like as tall as Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns. Like, the rotation from both of those players is going to be a little bit difficult given with how they can't necessarily move their feet quick enough to get to that player outside on the perimeter or get to that player out in the corner, especially when Rudy Gobert's focus is trying to defend the paint and cause disruptions with his length, putting his hands up, all that kind of stuff. So with this in mind, and like the teams just really have to focus on defensive rotations, especially the Bucks. The Bucks especially. Their pick and roll defense is horrible. It is absolutely terrible. I mentioned earlier in a previous podcast that their defense needed a lot of work. I'll go ahead and explain a little bit more with the time that I have. So again, what the Bucks do is they like to drop on the screens. So they let Brook Lopez drop on the screens, and because they let Brook Lopez drop, a lot of the players out on the perimeter leave open threes available. Like, the player can just come off the screen and just pull up. And that is a shot that a lot of players can hit now with how talented this league is. So they have to get rid of that shot while at the same time being able to defend the paint if the player setting the pick decides to roll. Now, that requires a lot of communication and a lot of rotation that it doesn't seem like this team is willing to do or can do as of right now. We have to see how Doc Rivers continues to be the coach, how he adjusts to this new lineup and how he coaches this team. But I personally think that they need to get much better at the rotations, and they have to stop letting up on these 3-pointers because that is what's killing them. That is what is ruining this team. Just letting up on 3-pointers. Same thing for a lot of these. Same thing for OKC when they lost to the Pistons. They were just giving the Pistons a lot of easy looks. Like they were lazy, and you can't afford to be lazy when you're in the playoffs. That's going to hurt them. So maybe that'll change because like we still haven't reached the All-Star game. We still haven't reached All-Star break. They still have room to change, but the change has to happen now. It really does have to happen now for the Bucks. And the OKC, Oklahoma City Thunder, I don't really see them doing much. I don't really see them making that much noise in the postseason. But we'll see going on. Like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, he's second in MVP voting. So maybe I'm just being a little too harsh on this Thunder team. Same with with this Minnesota team. They have a great team. They need to be able to do this in the playoffs. They need to be able to show a lot more energy and show a lot more drive and show a lot more maturity. Because that's the problem with this Timberwolves team, and that's the problem that Jimmy Butler had with this Timberwolves team. It was the maturity. Like, nobody was mature on that roster. So, with that, we are out of time with this podcast. Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Your support means a lot to us, so please remember to subscribe to the show, leave a positive review. It really does make a difference. We also invite you to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for more content and updates. Thank you once again. I am your host, Nelson, and as always, have a wonderful day and take care.